Hello and welcome. I'm Blair Blackwell, and this is the Daily Market Brief. Let's catch up on what's moving in markets today. Good morning. It's Friday, February 20th, and this is your New York Open Prep. Here are the key themes shaping the session. U.S. growth cooled while inflation stayed firm. Energy is bid on geopolitics, and a possible Supreme Court ruling on tariffs could swing the dollar in rates. The headline in the U.S. is a weaker fourth quarter, with gross domestic product expanding 1.4% versus much stronger forecasts, while core inflation by the Fed's preferred gauge held near 3%. Flash purchasing manager surveys still point to growth, but both manufacturing and services eased from last month. Markets opened mixed, Treasury yields are little changed, and consumer sentiment arrives shortly. One other note, there are questions this morning after reports that former President Trump previewed the soft GDP figure ahead of the official release. A potential catalyst lands at 10 a.m. Eastern when the Supreme Court is expected to publish opinions that may include a decision on tariffs. A ruling that upholds broad tariff authority would lean inflationary at the margin and could push rate cut expectations further out, typically dollar supportive. A decision that curbs that authority would be disinflationary over time, friendlier to global trade, and likely a modest headwind to the greenback. For traders, that matters. Across the Atlantic, the euro area's composite PMI recovered to a level consistent with moderate growth, with an improvement led by factories. The UK delivered a hat trick of upbeat surprises, from a record January budget surplus to stronger retail sales and better PMIs, though some desks still see room for Bank of England easing later this year. In Sweden, softer January inflation reinforced a dovish tilt at the Riksbank. Energy is back in focus. Oil prices had extended their rebound this week as tensions involving Iran lift the geopolitical risk premium, even as crude is well supplied. China has stepped up purchases of Russian barrels as India pulls back, rebalancing flows. And in the background, the UK's plan to transfer Chagos Island's sovereignty to Mauritius while keeping long-term access to Diego Garcia underscores the strategic importance of that base. Gold, meanwhile, is attempting to hold a pushback above the 5,000 mark, though it's been choppy. Turning to markets, the mix of softer growth and sticky prices is mildly risk-supportive outside the dollar, but the tariff headline risk keeps positioning cautious. Oil's tone is constructive, equities are split, and the dollar is steady into the data. Looking ahead, watch the University of Michigan sentiment later this morning and that Supreme Court opinion window. Otherwise, the calendar is fairly light, with attention shifting to policy speeches and next week's inflation updates. What you should be watching today? The Aussie dollar against the U.S. dollar, with a downside bias as softer global growth signals collide with sticky U.S. inflation. The British pound versus the yen, where stronger UK data and softer Japan inflation support an uptrend, while versus the dollar the pound may stay choppy. The U.S. dollar versus the Canadian dollar and Mexican peso into the tariff decision, with an uptrend risk if tariff authority is upheld and oil wobbles, and the opposite if authority is curtailed. The euro against the dollar, looking for a modest bid on better PMIs, unless U.S. inflation dynamics dominate. The dollar versus the Swedish krona, with a firmer bias on dovish Riksbank signals. In commodities, watch crude for follow-through on geopolitical risk, and gold to see if it can sustain momentum above 5,000. The takeaway? Growth is cooler, inflation is sticky, and policy headlines could do the steering. Stay nimble, but keep the bigger picture in view. That's it for today's edition of the Daily Market Brief. Thanks for listening. I'm Blair Blackwell. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice, trading recommendations, or investment guidance.